And let's see if we can finish the 15th chapter of the second book of A Tale of Two Cities. The name of the chapter is Knitting. The name of the book is The Golden Thread. We have just finished the testimony of Jacques the road mender, who saw the murderer of the Marquis, the man whose son the Marquis killed, hung over the fountain that everybody met at in the city and left there so that nobody was able to go to the fountain after that. And after he has left the room, the Jacques talk to Defarge about whether or not this will be logged in the registry, and the registry is something that is being kept by Madame Defarge through knitting, and I will go back to the beginning of that paragraph because it cut off right at the end. Jacques, returned Defarge, drawing himself up, if Madame my wife undertook to keep the register in her memory alone, she would not lose a word of it, not a syllable of it. Knitted in her own stitches and her own syllables, it will always be as plain to her as the sun. Confide in Madame Defarge. It would be easier for the weakest poltroon that lives to erase himself from existence than to erase one letter of his name or crimes from the knitted register of Madame Defarge. There was a murmur of confidence and approval, and then the man who hungered asked, "Is this rustic to be sent back soon? I hope so. He is very simple. Is he not a little dangerous?" "He knows nothing," said Defarge. "At least nothing more than would easily elevate himself to a gallows of the same height. I charge myself with him. Let him remain with me. I will take care of him, and set him on the road. He wishes to see the fine world, the king, the queen, the court. Let him see them on Sunday." "What!" exclaimed the hungry man, staring. "Is it a good sign that he wishes to see royalty and nobility?" "Jacques," said Defarge, "judiciously show a cat milk, if you wish her to thirst for it. Judiciously show a dog his natural prey, if you wish him to bring it down one day." Nothing more was said, and the mender of roads, being found already dozing on the topmost stair, was advised to lay himself down on the pallet bed and take some rest. He needed no persuasion, and was soon asleep. Worse quarters than Defarge's wine-shop could easily have been found in Paris for a provincial slave of that degree. Saving for a mysterious dread of Madame by which he was constantly haunted, his life was very new and agreeable, but Madame sat all day at her counter, so expressly unconscious of him, and so particularly determined not to perceive that his being there had any connection with anything below the surface, that he shook in his wooden shoes whenever his eye lingered on her, for he contended with himself that it was impossible to foresee what that lady might pretend next, and he felt assured that if she should take it into her brightly ornamented head to pretend that she had seen him do a murder and afterwards flay the victim, she would infallibly go through with it until the play was played out. Therefore, when Sunday came, the mender of roads was not enchanted, though he said he was, to find that Madame was to accompany the Monsieur and himself to Versailles. It was additionally disconcerting to have Madame knitting all the way there, in a public conveyance. It was additionally disconcerting yet to have Madame in the crowd in the afternoon, still with her knitting in her hands, as the crowd waited to see the carriage of the king and queen. "You work hard, Madame," said a man near her. "Yes," answered Madame Defarge, "I have a good deal to do." "And what do you make, Madame?" "Many things." "For instance?" "For instance," returned Madame Defarge composedly, "shrouds." The man moved a little farther away as soon as he could, and the mender of roads fanned himself with his blue cap, feeling it mightily close and oppressive. If he needed a king and queen to restore him, he was fortunate in having his remedy at hand, for soon the large-faced king and his fair-faced queen came in their golden coach, attended by the shining bull's-eye of their court, a glittering multitude of laughing ladies and fine lords, and in jewels and silks and powder and splendor, and elegantly spurning figures and handsomely disdainful faces of both sexes, the mender of roads bathed himself so much into his temporary intoxication that he cried, "Long live the king, long live the queen, long live everybody and everything," as if he had never heard the ubiquitous jocks in his time. Then there were gardens, courtyards, terraces, fountains, green banks, more king and queen, more bullseye, more lords and ladies, more long live they all, until he absolutely wept with sentiment. During the whole of this scene, which lasted some 3 hours, he had plenty of shouting and weeping and sentimental company, and throughout Defarge held him by the collar, as if to restrain him from flying at the objects of his brief devotion and tearing them to pieces. "Bravo!" said Defarge, clapping him on the back when it was over, like a patron. "You are a good boy." The mender of roads was now coming to himself, and was mistrustful of having made a mistake in his late demonstrations, but no. "You are the fellow we want," said Defarge in his ear. "You make these fools believe that it will last forever. Then they are the more insolent, and it is the nearer ended." "Hey!" cried the mender of roads, reflectively. "That's true. These fools know nothing, or they despise your breath and would stop it forever and ever. It is you. These fools know nothing, or they despise your breath and would stop it forever and ever. In you, or in 100 like you, rather than in one of their own horses and dogs, they only know what your breath tells them. Let it deceive them. Then, a little longer, it cannot deceive them too much." Madame Defarge looked superciliously at the client and nodded in confirmation. "As I told you," she said, "you would shout and shed tears for anything if it made a show and noise. Say, would you not?" "Truly, madam, I think so, for the moment." "If you were shown a great heap of dolls, and was set upon them to pluck them to pieces and to spoil them for your own advantage, you would pick out the richest and gayest, say, would you not?" "Truly, yes, madam." "And if you were shown a flock of birds unable to fly, and were set upon them to strip them of their feathers for your own advantage, you would set upon the birds of the finest feathers, would you not?" "It is true, madam." "You have seen both dolls and birds today," said Madame Defarge, with a wave of her hand toward the place where they had been apparent. "Now go home." And that is the end of chapter 15.